Viv, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. This was the advice given to me by my brother, Paddy. Advice he would repeat 1,000 times during my PhD. I was sitting in my hospital bed, a drip in each arm, and a journal article propped up in front of me. I was only 6 months into my PhD, and already I had 2 hospital admissions completed. I began in 2012 and I submitted in 2020. I was in college so long I was no longer known as Viv, but was known as Van Wilder by my friends. Today I'm here to tell you the story about my research journey, about my research and what I learned about myself in the process. When I began my research, although I had a disability, I was in good health, in full-time employment, living independently, and actively engaged socially in my community and workplace. I had a sense of power. I very much espoused the social model view of disability. I identified myself as a person with a disability, emphasizing the aspect of person first. But when I developed severe, uncontrolled asthma, I had to give it all up. I became dependent on the state for medical and financial support. This dependency continued and indeed was worsened as the income thresholds for my medical card and disability allowance prevented me from working part-time, as the limit did not cover the cost associated with a disability. I had become the unintentional victim of a system medically modelled that had set out to care for or fix me, but acted de facto to remove my sense of identity, my voice, and my power. I never considered quitting my PhD. Why? Well, because I wanted to understand the barriers and enablers to the social engagement of disabled students. I wanted to know if they felt like they belonged. I wanted to make a difference. All the literature tells us that the need and the want to belong is a powerful force within the lives of human beings. That longing to connect with another, to feel you are part of a community, something bigger than yourself, to know that you're not alone and someone else feels the same way about you. Although we celebrate and encourage independence, human beings are, by their very nature, interdependent and crave the love and support of another. Creating a sense of belonging has been identified as important for all students, but particularly for at-risk or non-traditional students. Students who feel like they belong report greater happiness and contentment. Even the mere sense of social connectedness works to enhance students' motivation to achieve. The development of a sense of belonging can happen in many ways, in many different situations and spaces, including through social engagement. As a disabled person, when we transition to higher education, we are at our most vulnerable. We are expected to disclose our disability, share our most intimate and private information to gain basic supports. As we enter an environment where we do not share the similar characteristics with those around us, we ask ourselves, are we worthy of love and belonging? We may struggle with cultural perceptions, unable to identify within our non-disabled peers because of a lack of role models within higher education, impacting upon our sense of place. My research uncovered that disabled students identified social engagement as critical for developing connections and making friends, resulting in that sense of belonging. Friends were seen as crucial for sharing problems with, good mental health, and the creation of that sense of belonging. My research found that belonging happens in the small interactions of everyday college life. That cup of tea, that chat in the corridor. My PhD found that the majority of disabled students felt like they were socially engaged and belonged within their college. Yet, almost all disabled students reported facing barriers to their social engagement. And although the majority of disabled students reported a sense of belonging in their college, students questioned their in-class sense of belonging, the very place where we most want them to feel like they belong and are loved. To feel a connection, we must have a strong sense of belonging. But there was one thing that has struck me most during my PhD journey, and that was love. Just saying the word makes me smile. It's a word we use in many different situations. For instance, I love ice cream. But then there is another love, that which we whisper to someone or shout from the top of our lungs, or maybe never say at all. The type of love that I'm talking about, though, is the type that involves the kindness and care for another. The Collins Dictionary says that you love someone when their happiness is very important to you, so that you behave in a kind and caring way towards them. As a PhD student, I felt that love too. The love of my friends and family, the kindness and care of PhD colleagues and friends. There was also a sense of this kindness and care in my research, a kindness and care for the students by staff, by the students for their peers and their college. This kindness and care was underpinned by a need to feel loved and cared for. So, why then do we have a system in higher education in which disabled students are uncertain about their in-class sense of belonging? The very place we want them to feel love and belonging. Maybe in the words of the Black Eyed Peas, we should be questioning, where is the love? Is it because we're afraid of making mistakes? Of getting it wrong? Afraid of making the system vulnerable? It is obvious from my research that the college climate created through the attitudes, the behaviours, the structures, the systems and the awareness of staff and students played a critical role in students' sense of belonging. Environmental factors, such as the absence or presence of barriers, acted to hinder or promote a sense of belonging by affecting the interaction of disabled students with peer groups, classmates, or the broader institutional community. Such barriers can be compounded by failures to deliver timely supports and embed inclusive practices. Institutions institutions themselves bear responsibility for the design and creation of campus environments. How can we begin to focus on the emotional and psychological aspects of belonging when students face such structural and systemic barriers? Perhaps we need to take a different approach. For me as a researcher, one of the most important parts was engaging in reflection. This involved engaging in a reflective process or boring the life out of my supervisor, Michael Shevlin. I remember calling him one day, starting with, Michael, I've a few quick PhD questions. It will take about 7 minutes. 47 minutes later, I had moved deftly on to speaking about the political situation in Syria. You see, care can be demonstrated in the smallest of ways. And sometimes all you have to do is give your time and listen. The most frustrating part of my PhD journey was the bouts of illness. Right when I was beginning to build the momentum, I'd get sick. You see, a PhD is comprised of key milestones, and the only one I ever hit was the final deadline. I remember doing my focus groups in February 2018. I had just completed one and was preparing to do the second. The evening before, I had been feeling a little unwell, and my brother reported that I had a very black complexion and should consider postponing. I decided to pop a few paracetamol and power on. Immediately after the focus group, I developed a blinding headache and vomiting. I remember lying for about 20 minutes on the floor of the disabled toilet in college before making my way home. When I got home, I was rushed to hospital with a case of septicemia. But I had completed my focus groups. It took great willpower, resilience, and quite a few tears to overcome these regular setbacks. It meant working through planned holidays and avoiding social outings. During those dark days, my target was to read one journal article a day. In a week, that adds up to 7. And I ate that damn elephant one nibble at a time. But the reality is, I got through with a little help from my friends, family, my community, and the supports within the college. And one thing I wish I had done was opened up to people more about chronic illness and the societal barriers that I faced. Explain the challenges that I was struggling with and requested more help. Because people want to help. I never thought about giving up on the PhD because no one ever once suggested it to me. I never doubted myself because the people around me believed in me. My dramatic change in personal circumstances, along with my interaction with the systems around me, had a profound impact on my view of the world and the lens through which I viewed my research. My experiences of the disempowering nature of the system became reflected in my work. I began to see myself as a disabled person. My research focused on placing the student at the heart of the research. I had now begun to see myself as working together with my disabled participants for personal and social transformation. I was, as per social constructivism, growing and developing. During my journey, I read about the great disability rights activists, including Mike Oliver and his community work in his local council. I read about the works of Eleanor Roosevelt and reflected on her words of where human rights begin. Human rights begin in the small places closer to home. I found my voice and took these words to heart. I used my newfound knowledge to bring about change in my own community and on state boards. And despite being isolated at home or in hospital, I connected with disabled people and academics in Ireland and across the world through social media. I developed an understanding of the wider worldview experience of disability. I developed an appreciation of how different, yet similar, that experience can be for the individual, whilst being seemingly connected and united under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I wrote with the words of the independent living movement in my mind. Nothing about us without us. I began my PhD in 2012 in the middle of a recession, and I completed it in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. I spent an average of 2 months of each year in hospital and many weeks at home in isolation. Remember, the PhD takes place in the middle of everything else that is happening in your life. Losing loved ones, moving to a new house, getting married, having babies, working, and or illness, or maybe all of them at once. It is important to celebrate the small wins. Take time to meet new people. Go for that cup of coffee. Develop connections. Make friends. Talk to people. And in the words of Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. As I wrote my PhD conclusion, the world around me was changing, and the lens through which I was viewing the world was evolving yet again. However, unlike in 2012, I am now skilled at working from home. I have experience of being isolated. I have a community and network around me, and I write with a sense of confidence in the knowledge that I have developed as a person over this research journey. So, the next time you feel overwhelmed, you feel that you can't complete your PhD, ask yourself the question, how do I eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Thank you.